Nobody cares what you think anymore, my daughter-in-law said in front of 43 guests, and for a moment, the entire room went silent. The words hung in the air longer than they should have, longer than any joke, longer than any apology that would never come. I looked around the banquet hall and waited for someone to say something. Anyone. My son Ethan stood near the cake table with a glass of sparkling water in his hand. He looked down at the floor. My granddaughter adjusted the ribbon on a gift basket. A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, but nobody spoke. Nobody defended me. Nobody even pretended that what Vanessa had just said was inappropriate. I smiled, not because I found it funny, not because I wasn't hurt. I smiled because at 68 years old, I had finally learned that some moments reveal more truth than years of polite conversation ever could. The celebration was supposed to be a family gathering. A beautiful Saturday evening in Scottsdale, Arizona. Warm weather, clear skies, string lights hanging above the outdoor patio. I had spent 2 weeks helping prepare for the event. I baked desserts. I coordinated decorations. I even arrived 3 hours early to help set up tables and arrange centerpieces. Vanessa had thanked me with that bright smile she always wore when other people were watching. Looking back now, I realized that smile was never warmth. It was strategy. Earlier that evening, I had noticed something strange. Every family photo being taken seemed to happen without me. By the time I walked over, everyone had already scattered. Every conversation stopped when I approached. Every laugh seemed to arrive just before I entered the circle. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself not to be sensitive. After all, people get busy. Families change. Children grow up. But then Vanessa stood up to make a toast. At first, it sounded harmless. She thanked everyone for coming. She praised the family. She talked about new beginnings and exciting plans. Then she looked directly at me. Some people have trouble accepting that things change, she said with a small laugh. Several guests chuckled politely. They still think their opinion should matter in every decision. More laughter. Then came the sentence I will never forget. But honestly, nobody cares what you think anymore. The room erupted with nervous reactions. A few people laughed. A few looked away. Ethan said nothing. That hurt more than her words ever could. I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat. For years, I had worried about being helpful enough, kind enough, generous enough. I had spent birthdays babysitting grandchildren so others could enjoy vacations. I had canceled trips to help family members solve problems. I had opened my home, my schedule, and my wallet whenever someone needed me. And suddenly, in one sentence, I understood exactly how little of that had mattered. I smiled, picked up my purse, and quietly walked toward the exit. Nobody stopped me. Nobody followed me. As I stepped into the warm desert evening, I made a decision that would change everything. That was the last day I ever tried to make them happy. The drive home felt strangely peaceful. The streets were quiet, and the warm Arizona air drifted through the small gap in my car window. For the first time in years, I was not rehearsing conversations in my head. I was not wondering whether I had said the wrong thing or whether I should apologize for something that was never my fault. I pulled into my driveway just after 9 o'clock and sat in the car for a moment, looking at the porch light glowing against the darkness. This little house had seen every version of me. The young wife, the nervous mother, the widow trying to rebuild a life after loss. And now, perhaps, a woman finally learning who she was without everyone else's expectations. Inside, the silence felt different than usual. It was not lonely. It was honest. I kicked off my shoes, poured myself a cup of chamomile tea, and sat at the kitchen table. My phone buzzed twice. Then 3 more times. I glanced at the screen. Vanessa. Then Ethan. Then Vanessa again. I did not answer. A few minutes later, a text appeared from Ethan. Mom, do not overreact. Vanessa was only joking. I stared at the message for several seconds before setting the phone face down. Overreact. It was a word I had heard many times before. Whenever I felt hurt. Whenever I pointed out something unfair. Whenever I tried to explain that a joke was not funny if only one person was laughing. Suddenly memories began returning with uncomfortable clarity. The time Vanessa scheduled Christmas dinner without telling me until the night before. The family vacation photographs I discovered online after everyone had returned. The school concert where I arrived to find my seat had been given away because nobody thought to save a place for me. Each event had seemed small by itself. Easy to excuse. Easy to forgive. but together they formed a pattern that was impossible to ignore. I carried my tea into the living room and looked at a framed photograph on the mantel. Ethan was 12 years old in that picture. He had a missing front tooth and his arm wrapped proudly around my shoulders. Back then, if someone had embarrassed me in public, he would have defended me without hesitation. I wondered when that boy had disappeared. Or perhaps the better question was when I stopped noticing the distance growing between us. Another message arrived, this time from Vanessa. You left without saying goodbye. People noticed. I actually laughed. Not loudly, just enough to surprise myself. For years I had worried about whether people noticed me. Tonight, Vanessa was worried because they finally had. I did not reply. Instead, I opened a drawer and pulled out a notebook I had not touched in months. On the first blank page, I wrote a simple sentence. What do I want? It seemed like such an ordinary question, yet I could not remember the last time I had asked it. My entire adult life had been spent asking what everyone else needed. As midnight approached, I looked at those 4 words again. For the first time in a very long time, I realized I did not owe anyone an immediate answer, not even my family. The next morning, I woke up at 6:30 out of habit. For years, my mornings had started the same way. Coffee brewing in the kitchen, a quick glance at my phone, a mental list of things other people needed from me. But that morning, I did something different. I left my phone on the nightstand. I made breakfast for one. I sat by the window and watched the sun climb over the desert mountains. The world kept moving. Nothing fell apart because I was not solving someone else's problems. Around 9 o'clock, the phone began buzzing again. Ethan called twice. Vanessa called 3 times. Then came a message. Mom, we need to talk. I stared at the screen and felt something unexpected. Not anger. Not sadness. Relief. For the first time in years, I realized that every conversation with them had become an obligation. A performance. A careful balancing act where I measured every word to avoid upsetting someone. I set the phone aside and drove to a small bookstore 20 minutes from my house. It was a place I used to visit with my late husband before life became crowded with responsibilities. The familiar smell of paper and coffee greeted me as I stepped inside. I wandered through the aisles without checking the time. Nobody was waiting for me. Nobody expected anything. It felt strangely luxurious. Around noon, I met my friend Carol for lunch. We had known each other for more than 30 years, but lately our conversations had been reduced to holiday cards and occasional phone calls. As we sat in a quiet cafe, she studied me carefully. You seem different, she said. I smiled. Maybe I am. Carol laughed softly. Good. The old Margaret would spend half of lunch worrying about everybody else's feelings. Her comment stayed with me long after we said goodbye. That evening, another message arrived from Ethan. This one was longer. Mom, everybody thinks you are upset. Vanessa feels terrible. I read it twice. Then I remembered Vanessa laughing as 43 people watched. I remembered Ethan looking at the floor instead of looking at me. Strange how concern always seemed to appear after consequences. I still did not answer. Days passed. Then a week. For the first time in years, I stopped initiating every conversation. I stopped checking whether anyone needed groceries delivered, children picked up, bills paid, or problems solved. The silence that followed taught me something important. My family rarely called because they missed me. They called because they needed me. On the 8th day, my granddaughter Lily unexpectedly appeared at my front door. She was 17 now, tall and thoughtful, with Ethan's eyes and her own quiet confidence. She stepped inside and looked around nervously. Grandma, she said, twisting a bracelet around her wrist. Can I ask you something? I nodded. Lily hesitated. Then she lowered her voice. Why is everybody panicking because you stopped calling them? I looked at her for a moment. Then I smiled. Because for the first time, I was starting to wonder the exact same thing. Lily stayed for nearly 2 hours that afternoon. We sat at the kitchen table with iced tea and a plate of store-bought cookies neither of us touched very much. She seemed uncomfortable, as though she had been sent to gather information without fully agreeing to the mission. Eventually, she looked down at her glass and sighed. Dad keeps asking if you are angry. Mom keeps saying she does not understand what happened. I almost laughed at the simplicity of that statement. Not because it was funny, but because it revealed how little they truly paid attention. Do you know what happened? I asked gently. Lily nodded. Everybody knows what happened. The answer surprised me. She met my eyes. Grandma, people were talking about it after you left. Some thought Mom went too far. Some thought Dad should have said something. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clock above the stove ticked steadily. Outside, a sprinkler clicked across a neighbor's lawn. Ordinary sounds. Honest sounds. Nothing like the noise that had filled my life for years. "Can I tell you something?" Lily asked. I nodded. "I do not think everybody is upset because you left the party. I think they are upset because you stopped doing what you always do." Her words settled heavily between us. After she left, I found myself replaying them again and again. That evening, I opened the notebook from the previous week. Under the question, "What do I want?" I added another sentence. "What happens if I stop being useful?" The answer arrived faster than expected. 2 days later, Ethan appeared at my front door without calling first. He looked tired, older somehow. He stood on the porch with his hands in his pockets, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked. I invited him inside. We sat in the living room where family photographs lined the shelves. Pictures from birthdays, graduations, vacations, evidence of a lifetime spent showing up for people I loved. Ethan glanced around the room before finally speaking. "Everybody is worried about you." I waited. "You have been distant." There it was. Not an apology. Not concern about my feelings. Concern about my behavior. Concern that I was no longer playing my usual role. "Have I?" I asked calmly. Ethan frowned. "You know what I mean." I did know. I simply wanted him to hear it. No more calls. No more checking in. No more helping with things. I folded my hands in my lap. "You mean I stopped managing everyone's lives for them?" His expression tightened. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he looked away. That silence told me more than any explanation could have. On his way out, he paused near the front door. Vanessa did not mean what she said. I looked at him carefully. Then why did she say it? He had no answer. After he left, I stood at the window watching his car disappear down the street. Years ago, that conversation would have left me anxious and heartbroken. I would have spent days wondering how to repair things. Instead, I felt calm. Because for the first time, I was beginning to understand something important. When people become uncomfortable with your boundaries, it often means they were benefiting from your lack of them. The following week brought something I had not expected. Freedom has a way of creating empty spaces, and those spaces eventually fill with new things. Instead of spending my mornings solving family emergencies, I enrolled in a watercolor class at the community center 5 miles from my house. Instead of keeping weekends open in case someone needed a favor, I started making plans of my own. I met new people. I laughed more than I had in years. Most surprising of all, I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. One Thursday afternoon, Carol and I were walking through an outdoor art fair when my phone lit up again. "Vanessa." I almost ignored it. Almost. But curiosity got the better of me. Her voice sounded unusually soft. "Margaret, I was wondering if you could help us this weekend." I leaned against a railing overlooking a small fountain. "Help with what?" There was a brief pause. "We need someone to watch the kids during a business event." The request itself was not unusual. Over the years, I had rearranged countless plans for similar situations. What surprised me was how automatic her expectations sounded. As though nothing had changed. As though the past several weeks had never happened. "I am afraid I cannot," I said pleasantly. Silence. Then another pause. "Why not?" The question made me smile. Not because it was rude. Because it revealed everything. Nobody had asked whether I wanted to. Nobody had asked whether I was available. The assumption had always been yes. "Because I already have plans," I replied. Vanessa sounded genuinely confused. "Plans?" I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The idea that my time might belong to me seemed difficult for her to understand. We ended the call politely enough, but something shifted after that conversation. The messages became more frequent. Ethan called twice that weekend. My younger grandson sent a text asking when he would see me again. Even relatives who rarely contacted me suddenly seemed interested in my well-being. At first glance, it looked like concern. But when I paid attention, I noticed a pattern. Most conversations eventually circled back to what I was no longer doing. No rides. No scheduling help. No last-minute rescues. No automatic availability. One evening, Lily stopped by again after school. She found me sitting on the back patio watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. "You seem happier," she said. I thought about that for a moment. The answer felt surprisingly simple. "I think I am." Lily nodded slowly. "Everybody keeps trying to figure out what changed." I looked toward the horizon where the last light was disappearing behind the mountains. Nothing changed, I said quietly. I just stopped pretending. For years, I believed love meant constant sacrifice. I believed being needed was the same as being valued. But standing there in the cooling desert air, I finally understood the difference. The people who truly care about you adjust when you create boundaries. The people who only benefit from you usually complain about them. And for the first time in my life, I was no longer afraid of disappointing either group.